What did you do in the past that made the opposite sex feel uninterested in you? What did you do to push your ex away? In this video, we're going to look into something that is called neuroassociations. Neuroassociations basically means that you have associated certain things with the feeling of pain. That's why it's called a neuroassociation, because it is a neurological connection to pain, right? It's in that manner. Now, typically, one of the primary reasons for human behavior in which a person will decide a yes or a no, to be drawn to you or to be not drawn to you, to be compelled to be with you or to be compelled to be away from you, largely is determined by a pain versus pain ratio. Because no matter which direction you're going to choose, all things are going to be painful. Some things are just varying degrees much less painful than others. For example, if you were to position someone in a boxed room and on both ends of the room there's these two spikes and you're sitting in the middle, obviously you'll be sitting in the middle because you're avoiding both pains. But if one spike gets bigger and the other spike gets smaller, then you're obviously going to be moving towards the smaller spike because it's much less painful. And this is what people do in real life. The majority of people's choices are determined by this pain mechanism. This is why it's so difficult for people to change bad behaviors, bad habits, bad mentalities, because often people sit themselves in a position where changing actually becomes much more painful than being in this terrible position. And this is also the perception of pain as well. So they might actually perceive this to be the case when in reality it could be the opposite direction. So both actual pain and perceived pain play a very important role in the decision-making process of whether to be drawn to you or whether to be repulsed by you. And if you're ever wondering to yourself, why did your ex leave you? Or why did your romantic interest show no interest towards you? This is the principle that plays a huge role in all of that. It's kind of like saying, I want a husband, if you're a woman, right? And someone will ask you, are you wife material? And some women will call her pick-me for saying that, right? But are you offering something of value that a husband would find valuable? Are you becoming wife material yourself? Are you positioning yourself as someone who a husband would be attracted to? If you're not positioning yourself as someone a husband would be attracted to, then it would be more painful for that husband or potential husband to want to reach out, it would be drawn to you and even agree to marrying you, etc. Risks, complications, adversity. Do you mitigate these things or do you pile on top of these things? The breakup of your past relationships, perhaps. A lot of the time, if you hold the form of accountability, then you should realize that you played a huge contribution to the downfall of the relationship, even if your partner was narcissistic. It was obviously becoming far too painful for that relationship to exist. It was becoming far too painful for that person to treat you well if they were narcissistic. Or maybe it was far too painful for them to stay in the relationship and they left you because you were actually providing so much pain to them that they felt they had no choice but to leave because they had no idea what else to do. Now, I want to throw this really random question out there to challenge your mind and get you thinking, right? If you have a slave owner and you have a slave, who is in control of the slave? Because I ask this question because a lot of the time I teach that we have control of ourselves, right? But if you have a slave, does the slave control himself if he's owned by a slave master? You would say, technically not, because, right? Is the slave self-imposing his own self-control against his will? Maybe, kind of. But it's really this, right? Control is mental. It's mental. Control is mental. And we associate whatever controls us with some type of mental block. So whether you're a slave owner or you're the slave yourself, the control is attributed to this mental block, this sort of agreement, you could say, this sort of assumption or belief or fact, whether it's true or not. And this mental block, you sort of assume that it controls you. You play out that it controls your life. And the slave, he anticipates the consequences, the punishment, the pain of going against the mental block. Now, people self-impose this against themselves. So if you're ever wondering how to change someone's mind or how to influence someone's mind, you need to get into their belief systems and figure out what is the mental block that they have in their head, and what are the neuro associations of pain that they anchor or associate with that mental block. If you wanted to get back with your ex, does your ex anticipate the pain of being betrayed again? Or is there some outside factor that you are not aware of that is contributing to some type of pain? A very easy one would be like, do you have a massive drinking problem? Do you have massive anger issues? Are you super judgmental? Do you have a fixed mindset? For me personally, having the fixed mindset was the worst thing, and I'd much rather have a growth mindset as much as possible. Are they afraid that they're going to be judged if they hang out with you? Are they afraid that their friends are going to, mistreat them and their family members are going to disown them for hanging out with you? Or vice versa. Just to get you think, right, about how control over us is typically a mental block. That's where the control actually lies. So what does this all mean? So basically, I want you to imagine, right, that there is something painful that the opposite sex has going with them, right? And it is your job to discover what that is. When you do not know what this is, if you are not curious enough to investigate and figure out what this is, you're going to be remaining in a realm of ignorance. And you can't solve your problems with the same knowledge that you used to create them. That knowledge being ignorance. You lack the knowledge. And it is your job, with a growth mindset, hopefully, to discover the true nature behind why people are not being drawn to you, or your partner isn't being compelled to return to you, or your ex left you, example. And instead of blaming your ex for leaving, you can always take the form of accountability and figure out what you did wrong. Because if the problem is with you, then you can control or figure out what you are doing that is repulsing the other person away. Do you bring peace and stability, or do you bring chaos and havoc? Do you remain emotionally stable during adversity, or do you crumble under pressure?